There's never a dull moment when it comes to Minnesota sports. Whether it's positive or negative.
The Yankees have swept the Twins.
Minnesota Sports Chat has you covered. Talking nothing but Minnesota sports all year long. It's time now for the soon-to-be award-winning, if only in his own mind, Minnesota Sports Chat with your host, Ross Brendel.
You know, with election season all but wrapped up for at least a year and a half, I kind of forgot how poetic the Howard Dean scream was to this open for Minnesota Sports Chat. Welcome inside edition number 238 of the soon-to-be award-winning Minnesota Sports Chat, presented by my friends at Beans Coffee Company. Head to coffeebybeans.com. Snag yourself some great tasting coffee. Today, we're going to meet the Manny quota for the first time, I think, in a few months. He is from Jazz 88. He is a Purple Insider contributor, Score North and 1500 ESPN contributor, behind the scenes man. He is one of the nicest and best dudes you will ever meet. He is Mr. Manny Hill, joining me on this record date of I don't want to say early Friday morning, but it's fairly early. We're recording this in the 8 o'clock hour. Good morning, buddy. Great day to you. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm just getting off of my last PA announcing duties at Todd Field down in Hastings last night. We hosted a state tournament game, first round of the state tournament football tournament last night out there between Chatfield and Triton, which was a really, really good game. So I'm just kind of sort of refreshing my voice after doing that last night.
Yeah, and people who listened earlier this week when I was joined by Daniel House will know that I'm coming off of some illness. I would guess, I always think the flu is when you're heaving, but I don't think that that's entirely true. I must have had some form of a cold and flu, had a bit of a fever, a bit more congested and nasally than normal, but I believe I'm about as good as I can be right now. So feeling pretty good. Manny, I knew something was wrong on Sunday when I had all the windows cracked. It was in the upper 40s and I still thought it was hot. That's when I realized my body temperature was slightly higher than it's supposed to be, but we're feeling good now. It's funny when you are sick, Manny, and I know I don't know how, if you're sick, but you're kind of going through something or just trying to rest up. It's funny because at least I know for me, every time I get better, immediately for the first couple of days, you appreciate being healthy and well. Mm-hmm. And you're like, boy, I'm never going to take this for granted. I'm going to do everything I possibly can to never get sick again. And then you get sick again.
Yeah.
then you get sick again. Okay. Let's do this. Let's start with our 6-2 Minnesota Vikings. I know amongst some fans, Manny, I know the way the last 3 games have played out, I think there's still some disappointment. And I do get that. The Vikings coming off of a win by beating the Colts. Prior to that, they had lost 2 straight to the Rams and the Lions. But overall, Manny, at 6-2, there might be players or things that I'm disappointed with, but I won't be disappointed with a 6-2 record, especially when I look at the next 3 games. And it wouldn't be non-Vikings like, non-NFL like for the Vikings to lose one of these next 3 games. But I'm fairly confident they're going to come out of this at 8-3 or better. And it's really tough to be upset about that, especially when the masses didn't even think this team at the beginning of the year was capable of winning 8 games. So I still feel pretty good. It looks like the Vikings are going to get Mac Jones on Sunday and not even Trevor Lawrence. We know the history with this team and backup quarterbacks. I'm well aware of that. But I think you'd rather play Mac Jones than Trevor Lawrence. So I think the Vikings are really in a good spot here, and especially coming off of a win where you had to grind it out and nothing went your way in the first half. It's really tough to be negative right now, other than it seems darn near impossible that anybody could catch the Detroit Lions, but there's still a half a season to go. You never know.
Yeah, it kind of feels like Detroit is in that tier 1 of teams in the NFC and, really the NFL for that matter. And then it feels like it's the Lions up here and everybody else in the NFC is just kind of a step below, teams like the Vikings, Philadelphia, maybe San Francisco, if they can get back healthy again, Green Bay, although we'll see what happens with Jordan Love's health going forward for them. But it really kind of seems like Detroit is sort of the head above everybody else. As far as the Vikings being 6-2, I mean, you can't. I going into the year, and even I like sometimes get annoyed sometimes with this notion about, well, we weren't expecting them to be this good, so there's no problems. But the reality is none of us had them being 6-2 before the season started through 8 games, through basically the halfway point of the season. So I think you just have to take it for what it is and enjoy what we're seeing so far. It's easy to get frustrated with some of the injuries. Losing Christian Darrisaw was a huge blow, but they addressed that. They went and made the trade for Cam Robinson. Cam Robinson is certainly not Christian Darrisaw, but he was serviceable.
He's also not Blake Brandel in a good
Right.
way. And I'm not even ripping Blake Brandel. He's just a better player.
100%. 100%. And so by getting Cam Robinson, it allows you to have a little bit more flexibility on that offensive line to where you don't have to take Blake Brandel and move him from left guard to left tackle. And then you have to try and force Dalton Reisner back into the lineup when he might not be ready yet. Although, stay tuned. We might see him in a right guard here fairly soon, hopefully. But that's another conversation we can have a little bit later. But yeah, I mean, you lose basically your second best player on offense after Justin Jefferson. You lose your left tackle. It's a huge blow, but you go out and you address it. Doesn't cost you a lot, and he's a nice fill-in player that can get you through the rest of the season, provided he can stay healthy as well. And you're still in pretty good position with the schedule you have coming up. So we could blink here, a month from now, and the Vikings are right there, still maybe in the conversation to still win this division, provided they take care of business over these next 3 games.
Yeah, I love what you said about that. You can look at a 6-2 team and be happy, but also realize that, hey, there might be some problems and issues here. I do agree with that as the season goes on, just because I think that wasn't the Vegas over under like 5.5, so they've passed that. Just because you've already hit that number, that doesn't mean that you can't still get better at things. That doesn't mean that expectations change. And I agree with you. Expectations can definitely change throughout the season. Expectations have changed throughout the season for the Gopher football team. Maybe we'll get to that as well. So it can absolutely happen. But I still look at it and say, there are definite issues with this team, but I went into the year thinking, and I think you and I talked about this prior to the season, if the Vikings win, great. If they lose, no problem. And I'm now kind of getting to the point where, okay, now that you're 6-2, the losses might be a little bit more annoying, but this also was never supposed to be a year where you were competing at this point to have the number 1 seed in the NFC, be a team that could be a Super Bowl contender. So again, albeit expectations can change and you can get more frustrated, I think sometimes too, you have to take a step back and look at the team and say, okay, this is fun. Things are going well, but we can also acknowledge, just like the Vikings team that went 13-4 and lost right away in the playoffs, they might be punching a little bit above their weight class, which is totally fine too. They're allowed to do that. But at some point that will even out. I will say this though, Manny, this far into the season, I'm not saying they will win a playoff game, but I think this team is more likely to win a playoff game than the last Vikings team that made the playoffs and lost to the Giants right away. Because I think they do some things better than that Vikings team did. Primarily, I think
this is the better team.
And primarily, I think they play a lot better defense. So I think that helps in the playoffs. And for a team that historically doesn't play well in the playoffs on the road, I think having a solid defense can help with that. So overall, Manny, I remain very positive. If you beat Jacksonville, you avoid the upset, you get to 7-2. I don't like doing this because you have to play the games, but logic would tell you somehow, some way you go to Tennessee and you win. And all of a sudden you're 8-2 heading into Chicago. That's fun. I will say the annoying part is, what are the odds that the Lions have even lost a game by that point? I'm sure they'll lose another game or two, but it feels like all you're doing is chasing the 5 seed at this point, which again is also fine. I just realistically, I'm not sure. Boy, this sounds so negative. Realistically, I'm not sure what you're playing for other than you want to win when you play, because I just don't view this team as a legit Super Bowl contender. And nothing that they did at the trade deadline was going to change that. I don't think one Dexter Lawrence was all, and I could be wrong here. I don't think one guy like Dexter Lawrence was going to make this team a Super Bowl contender.
Well, he's pretty good.
Okay. No, he is.
Good.
He is. But what I'll say this, and this is not a rip on Sam Darnold. If he's going to keep throwing interceptions like he has the last 3 weeks,
yeah,
it's the opposite of what I said about the Lions losing Aiden Hutchinson. There's no better team no team that was more ready to lose a player like Aiden Hutchinson than the Lions because they can score 40 points a game.
Yeah. Well, and of course they go and get Sedarius Smith, which is going to help a little bit with that pass rush too.
And then the opposite problem then for the Vikings, it doesn't matter how well Dexter Lawrence plays defense if he's not coming up with multiple strip sacks a game and doing scoop and scores. I don't know if that's going to overcome the boneheaded plays that happen on offense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that part of the thing with Sam Darnold is, and this is where, JJ McCarthy getting hurt is a little bit of a tough thing to sort of deal with, is that if and when Sam Darnold starts really making these boneheaded decisions, and I think Sam overall has played really well, but when he starts making those boneheaded decisions, it's kind of like, okay, well, you have JJ McCarthy to maybe go to, if you decide you want to make a change there. But now it's like you're kind of thinking or swimming with Sam Darnold at this point the rest of the season, because it ain't like Nick Mullins is going to step in and do anything better. It might even get a lot worse. And
as they should be, Manny. After the Vikings went to 5-2 and you go into that mini bye, some people said, well, if JJ McCarthy is healthy, they might have made the change here. No, they wouldn't. You're not going to bench a guy who's 5-2 and lost a couple of games. I guess what I'm saying is it's really hard to imagine when you throw the 2 interceptions like he did against the Colts. It's hard to imagine that a road playoff game playing teams that are much better than the Colts, that when you see some of the throws that have led to turnovers the last few weeks, it's hard to believe, for as good as he's been, and he deserves all the credit in the world, it's hard to believe that guy can win 3 road playoff games with those, as our fearless leader here at Score North calls them, Phil Mackey, blue screen of death plays. And if you're going to have those are really tough to overcome against good teams. You can overcome 3 turnovers and a scoop and score against the Colts. Can you do it at the Rams in the playoffs again? Well, maybe, because that'll be a home game, even though you lost your last home game in LA. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Sam Darnold is a flawed quarterback, and this is why he is playing for this is his 4th team that he's played for.
It does make it fun to watch, though, doesn't it? Because you just truly never know. It's like the Case Keenum year. When that ball comes out of his hand, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah,
could be brilliant, could be brutal.
Yeah, and I think what you just have to do is, if you're a fan, you just have to you acknowledge the flaws. I think you just have to just kind of enjoy this ride. Ross, this is honestly, and this is going to sound like I'm taking a shot at the previous quarterback, but this is the most fun I've had following this team since 2017.
Well, Manny, I've said this at the beginning of the year. Enjoy this. If they win, it's fun. If they lose, water off a duck's back. What does it matter? They're not supposed to contend this year, and they're probably not going to win the Super Bowl. So just enjoy it. That's it. Yeah. That's been my main message all year. It's been more fun because they've won more than I expected. But the 2 losses, I think the Rams loss was annoying, but it didn't really bug me. You could kind of explain it away. The Lions game was a ton of fun. That was a hell of a game to watch.
And you lost by 2 points. And that game was literally like 1 or 2 plays away from the Vikings actually winning that game and being in first place right now. And if that had happened, what are we even talking about now? I mean, we might be having a completely different conversation. So, yeah, I mean, it's been fun. I think it's fair to discuss the issues, the struggles of the defense a little bit for a couple of weeks there. I think, as soon as Blake Cashman can get back into this lineup on defense, the better, because I don't think it can be overstated how much he's been missed on that defensive side. Now, you faced a 39-year-old Joe Flacco on Sunday night, and you were able to put together a good defensive performance. But you're going to want to have your green dot linebacker who's out there making the calls, telling everybody where to be. That's a huge thing. And I know it doesn't show up in the box score, but you can tell the difference with what this defense is doing when Blake Cashman isn't out there. Now, yeah, it'd be nice to get a little bit more of a pass rush from their interior defensive linemen. And I'd like to see Brian Flores, dip into his bench in the secondary a little bit more. So guys like Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin don't get worn down because they're a little bit longer in the tooth. So I'd like to see a little bit of that too. But overall, this is about as good as we can expect from this team. And I just say enjoy this ride and be upset and disappointed with the losses. But like my biggest thing is this, and Matthew Collar and I have had this conversation on Purple Insider a lot over the last couple of weeks. I don't want to talk about the draft in April every time this team loses a game. And it feels like that's kind of been the thing going on, is like every time this team loses a game now, it's like, oh my gosh, this is a disaster. What are they going to do? They need to address this in the offseason, and what are they going to do with their draft pick? And I'm like, yo, they're 6-2. It's okay. They got 9 regular season games left. Let's just enjoy this. That's the only thing you can do right now. I don't want to talk about April.
If they go 4-5 from here on out, which would be a disappointment. I don't know if you could call it a failure. They would still go 10-7 and very likely make the playoffs.
Yep.
So to your point, yeah, let's calm down a little bit. Also, what are they going to do in the draft? I can tell you probably next to nothing, because they're going to have very little capital, even if they trade their first round pick for more picks. So yeah, I'm with you. You can talk draft when we get there. And look, for some teams, draft talk comes earlier than others. This Vikings team is not one where you start talking about the draft at this point. Teams that are talking about the draft already are teams that you're going to play over the next few weeks, the Tennessee Titans and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I got one college football question for you. And again, I don't like putting games in win columns before you play them, but the Golden Gophers have, I think, a pretty good opportunity to, at bare minimum, get to 7 wins. Potentially, I would hope they could maybe find a way to get to 8. Hell, they could run the table and finish 9-3.
You got to be Rutgers, man. You got to be Rutgers.
Absolutely.
You got to be Rutgers.
Nope. That's where the 7 came from. Absolutely have to. And the way this year's gone for the Gophers, I don't think you can automatically say that they will beat Rutgers, especially knowing that Rutgers has had a few weeks off. But let's say this. Let's just say the season ended today. We're not going to take into account anything that's going to happen over the next 3-4 weeks for the Gophers. Yes, some disappointing and dumb losses to start the year, but it's all part of the story. So my question to you is, since he's been here, and 2019 is probably the answer, but can we say, is this PJ Fleck's best coaching job at Minnesota? This team also had a low win projection. They were projected to win 4.5 games and finish near the bottom half of the Big Ten. If they win one of their next 3, logically looking at the standings, they're going to finish in the middle of the pack. So I think this is a hell of a coaching job by him. And the main reason that I say this is it's an entirely different offense that has evolved and gotten better as the season has went along. Yeah. And he and the staff should get a ton of credit for that. And by the way, maybe it'll be tomorrow. The Gopher defense has played really exceptional defense for like a total of 8 out of their 9 games. That's not easy to play good defense week in and week out. And they've done it. So yeah, again, in today's college football, what does it really mean? You go 8-4, you're going to go to some bowl game that most people don't care about, but you do care about the regular season games and beating teams in your conference that you feel like you should beat, or in Illinois' case, or Brett Bielema's case, that you literally haven't ever beaten. Again, this should be enjoyed, but I just think unless this really goes belly up the final 3 weeks and they only win one more game or they lose all their games, at this point, I think this is PJ Fleck's best coaching job at Minnesota.
Well, it's a great talker. It's a great conversation, because it is easy to just say, well, 2019, but 2019, they also had like 2 NFL wide receivers and, a good offensive line and And
I'll say this.
some really good players on defense, NFL players on defense.
And I hate to say this, and the Gophers did their part. They took advantage of it, but a much more favorable schedule than the one the Gophers have played this year.
Yeah.
And you still have to win the games. I enjoyed every second of that. I'm not taking that away from them. But the beginning of this season for the Gophers, and I think the schedule showed that, was much more difficult than what they dealt with back in 2019. And again, I think that's the best coaching job. 2019 probably is. But if you remove 2019, I think this is the answer. I think this is the best job he's done here.
Yeah, it is. Now, I think how these next 3 games, sort of play out, I think will also kind of determine that and kind of shape that as well, because you need to take care of business against Rutgers tomorrow. And, I think Penn State's a better football team, but I think they've got a decent shot to compete with Penn State, and if some things go their way, they can find a way to win that game. And then you're really saying like, oh yeah, this is probably the best coaching job. And then whatever happens at Wisconsin, we'll see. I think Wisconsin is very beatable as well. So you're going to have an opportunity to win 2 out of these next 3 games at least. And I think that's where if that happens and you finish 8-4 in the regular season, get to a bowl game, whatever that bowl game is, and then you find a way to win that, and you go 9-4, then we're talking about another 9-win season for BJ Fleck, which those are starting to pile up a little bit, before you know it. So,
which would be the 4th time he's had at least 9 wins, correct? He had 2 9-4 seasons, 11-2 with the Auburn Outback Bowl victory. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I've really, the North Carolina, you and I in our texting conversations off air have talked a lot about the North Carolina game, and it's still, even today, it still kind of bugs me a little bit. Doesn't bug me as much as it did maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago. I think getting the win at Illinois, because I had that game down as a loss for them, because I think a lot of people overrated Illinois. I don't think Illinois is really all that good. But getting that win, that was a win I didn't expect them to have. So it kind of eases, and because it's a conference game, it makes it even better. It kind of eases things off of the North Carolina loss. And Pete, I think there's reason to criticize PJ for that North Carolina loss, but also if Kessis just makes the field goal, they win the game and nobody's even thinking about it. You know? So
correct.
It's one of those things. So
and I think too, the North Carolina loss, as you mentioned, we texted about this. 7-2 looks a hell of a lot better than 6-3. But at the end of the day, now that you've become bowl eligible, it doesn't matter for your bowl slotting at all. And the Big Ten is likely going to get, I'll say this again for the second time in this podcast, they'll all probably punch above their weight class, because with Indiana very likely headed to the college football playoff, that might slot everybody else up.
How about that, by the way? Oh my gosh.
I think they'll lose to Ohio State. Beyond that, I'm not convinced they'll lose to anybody else. I mean, they could, in theory, lose to Michigan. There's talent on Michigan, but I just don't think that Michigan can score. And if you can't score, you're not going to beat Indiana, because they can score.
Yeah, well, Michigan just had the guy that they inserted into their starting lineup, their quarterback, he just medically retired. And so that team is just kind of I don't know. They've got some really good players on defense, but I don't know if their offense is going to be able to do enough. And Indiana can put some points on the board. And you know what? The biggest thing with Indiana, I don't want to make this an Indiana podcast, but
please do.
But Ross, the best thing about Indiana is because they've always been kind of the last handful of years, they've been a team that puts a lot of points on the board. They're stopping people now too.
Yes. Yeah.
They're playing defense now. So they're fun, man. And I think, if they beat Michigan this weekend and then, probably lose to Ohio State, but, they'll take care of business against Purdue to wrap up the season. They're going to be playing in the playoff.
And I look at it this way. I am one of those people, I do kind of love to cheer against the conference, even though it's not possible for every team to lose every weekend because they're playing each other. I get envious of other programs, right? When other teams do stuff like Indiana going to the college football playoff. Old Ross, that would kind of annoy, because, well, why can't the Gophers do that? Well, as I've stated numerous times, if this system existed in 2019, they may have made the college football playoff. So when you look at what Indiana is doing, I think it sends a good message to the rest of college football that you can do this. Maybe you can't do it year in and year out. I don't believe Indiana's going to all of a sudden start going 10-2 every year. I don't. But they're now at the point where when given a schedule that they've had, and again, they've taken advantage of it, you can have a chance to be a team that's not Georgia, Alabama, insert other programs that you want, Clemson, Ohio State. You can also compete and make the college football playoff and have the chance that all these other schools have claimed they've wanted for years. You know me, I don't love 12 teams. I think we would have been just fine at 8, but I do like that it opens it up for more schools. And in theory, Manny, when you go recruiting, also opens your school up to more players because now you don't have to go to Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State if you want to win a national championship. In theory, there's probably 30-ish schools you can now go to that have a puncher's chance to do so.
What makes me giggle about the 12-team playoff too is like, so the first rankings come out this week, and all the folks on ESPN, they're looking at the top 12 teams and they're just like, oh, this team's not that good. They shouldn't even be in the conversation right now. It's like, well, it was like Indiana was one of those teams, like they're 9-0. They haven't lost anybody yet. If you take them out, who are you going to put in? You're going to put in SMU, Texas A&M with 2 losses, LSU with 2 losses. Like, who are you going to, like, there's going to be, when you open up the field, there's going to be more Cinderella type of teams that
absolutely
get opportunities to get in. So that's just a reality. I don't love the 12-team playoff either. I thought if they were going to, I feel there's a couple of issues with it because I felt like they should have like expanded to like 6 or 8. But at the same time, I've just said, well, eventually they were going to expand to 12 anyway. So you might as well just get the expansion to 12 out of the way now.
Yeah. I also do think, Manny, although this scenario probably won't happen this year, but we've talked about this. I do think the thought of like Texas going to Iowa State the first week of the playoffs and having to potentially play in an inch of snow and 35 degrees in early December, I do think I think that could potentially be fun. And that inevitably will happen one day where you have a warm weather school playing in the Midwest or out east and the temperature is not favorable. So I think that could be a ton of fun at some point. Also a ton of fun for me is my mornings because I got this great Beans Coffee Company coffee, which I know you have become a fan of. Manny, coffeebybeans.com is the website. I'm confident that just like myself and Manny, if you go to coffeebybeans.com and check out what they have and maybe dabble and try a little bit, you're probably going to become a lifetime fan because this is really good stuff. You guys know by now, I'm a big fan of the Perfectus blend. Judd loves the Mikado. Truth be told, everything that I've had from there is great. It's kind of like pizza, Manny. It's all good. Some is just better than others, and it's up to you to choose which one is better than others because everybody's palate is different. How can you do that? Coffeebybeans.com. Promo code SportsChat will save you at checkout. That is promo code SportsChat at coffeebybeans.com to save you some cash on some great tasting, small batch, locally roasted coffee by sports fans just like ourselves. They get all up and high on Minnesota sports like we do, only for the inevitable crash, Manny. They're just like us. Speaking of a team that did crash late last year, put together a new fandangled roster very late in the offseason. We'll close with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I was sitting in helping to produce a Flagrant Howls. You used to do the Raised by Wolves podcast for Score North. And Kyle Teige was, he said something very similar to what I've said. I think you want to win more than you lose the beginning of the year, but wake me up on January 1st. Just don't bury yourself early. Keep yourself in the mix. And then moving season is basically January 1st through the end of the year. It's even if they had changed this roster in the middle of the offseason, it was always going to take time. And the fact that as we record this, they're 5-3 through 8 games. You continue extrapolating that out. You're 10-6. They'll be fine. I think they'll be fine. I don't know how far they can go this year. I really don't. But they're not going to be all of a sudden a 41-win team. They're going to be just fine.
Yeah, I think provided they could stay healthy, Anthony Edwards, I'd say this a lot. Obviously, you hear me say this a lot as far as teams go with projections and everything. As long as they can stay relatively healthy, they'll be fine. it's funny because everybody was losing their minds when they lost on opening night to the Lakers and completely forgetting about how a year prior they started out their season on the road in Toronto and laid an egg and weren't very good. And then that ended up being a Raptors team that was one of the worst teams in the league last year. So, yeah, I mean, I think you just have to enjoy what you're watching right now. They're playing pretty good. It's not even that bad right now. And I think once they kind of get into a groove as the season progresses, we're going to start seeing guys like Dante DiVincenzo shoot a better percentage. I think Mike Conley will start to get a little bit better as he, maybe gets more opportunities to maybe take some games off, let some of the younger guys play. We'll see how that kind of plays out. I would like to see, the Terrence Shannons and the Rob Dillinghams get a little bit more run. They seem to just be getting time when they're blowing teams out, which is it's good to see the Wolves blowing teams out. That's a good sign.
It's early too. It could be a bit of an ease-in process as well.
Absolutely. And listen, I just talked about staying healthy. Guys get injured. It's the NBA. This happens. So, you don't want for anybody to get injured, but if it does happen, I think this is one of the deepest teams, if not the deepest team in the entire league. And so I think they're going to be able to withstand some injuries. Obviously, you don't want to lose like Ant or Rudy Gobert or something like that. But, if Nickeil Alexander-Walker, knock on wood, not rooting for it, but if something happens where he has to miss a few weeks, well, that can open the door for a Terrence Shannon Jr. to step in and get more minutes and get more run. If Mike Conley needs to take some games off or have some of his minutes pulled back, that might open up an opportunity for a Rob Dillingham to get into some games a little bit more and have more of a defined role. So, yeah, I think it's just, again, it's kind of like what we're saying about the Vikings. Just enjoy, the expectations for the Wolves are a little bit different. You're coming off a Western Conference Finals trip. But I think with so many new pieces, I think you just have to enjoy the process of this whole thing sort of playing out. How does Julius Randle continue to sort of evolve into this roster? And what'll happen with it, how that will play out with his future and everything too. So I'm good with what I've seen so far overall, and I think it's going to get better as the season progresses.
Final talker that has already been beaten into the ground, but I don't know if you and I have had a chance to talk about this. Maybe we've texted about it. Is there anything funnier in the last month than the Dwayne Wade statue in Miami? So I came to a realization. Do you know who I think it looks like? It looks like Blake Griffin.
Really?
That's who I think. That's who I think it looks like. I don't know. Everything about it was hilarious. One, he looks like a gargoyle. So that to me is hilarious. The way they presented it, like with the music and like the fog and the walls falling down, like that was kind of hilarious. How there is no way throughout the process, and apparently he saw it 3 or 4 times. At some point, not one person looked at that and said, guys, we're not even in the ballpark here. Like I kind of feel bad for him. They've taken so much heat for this, Manny. It wouldn't surprise me in the next few years if they do the old, okay, yep, we were wrong. We're going to do this again. Like, it's bad.
It's pretty bad. Here's my thing with statues though. How many statues have we seen?
I'm going to stop you right there. Almost all the twin statues are very good.
That's
the twin
true.
statues are very good.
The twin statues are pretty good. But I think just like generally speaking, when you look at like statues that we've seen for decades, going back decades, how many of them have we really looked at and said, oh yeah, looks just like them?
Yeah, fair point.
We see that with like the busts of NFL players that go into the Hall of Fame. We see
Joe Mauer's bust this year.
Yeah, we see a bunch of them that are just like, I don't know if that's real. I mean, the Cristiano Ronaldo one is the most famous one. That's like the really egregious one.
The holy grail of egregious bust/statues.
Well, and the other part of this too, like even the statues of like historical figures that were alive, back in the 18th, 19th century, many of whom have been taken down, by the way. But like, how many of those do we really even know? We never saw who any of those people like really looked like. We only saw paintings of those people.
Well,
so how do you know that those things are accurate?
Yeah, that is the beauty. 100 years from now, unless you look it up on whatever contraption they're using to look stuff up on, they won't know what Dwayne Wade actually looked like. But I just thought it was hysterical. It's nothing that anybody should lose sleep over. And also, to your point, Manny, I think the process of just getting a statue and being told you're getting one probably actually means a heck of a lot more than the statue itself and the inscription that they put on it. It's just comically not close. That's the hilarity for me. Anything exciting for you, Manny, happening in the world right now? Let us know in 30 seconds or less everything that's happening at Jazz 88, MPS Voices, and everything you're involved with in North Minneapolis.
Yeah, we're in the process of moving back over to North completely now. I've been officing out of there now for really since school started back in September. And yeah, things are going good. Things are progressing nicely, and we're looking to get settled back in over North here very soon.
Love it. I will be meeting with your current fearless leader and my former fearless leader for a lunch here in the very near future. I'm looking forward to that. I have a gift he asked me to procure that I need to pass off to him.
Okay.
I'll tell that to you off air. It's nothing bad, but I can't spoil the secret, okay?
Love it.
It really is not bad. I just can't spoil it. All right, that's all I got for you, Manny. Thanks a ton.
You got it. Always a pleasure.
That is Mr. Manny Hill. You can hear him with Purple Insider, KBEM, Jazz 88. Occasionally, you'll hear him on the mighty 1500 ESPN as well. I'll be back again in this here feed very soon, early next week with Daniel House for the Golden Gopher review and preview pod. We'll talk again real soon. Thank you so much for listening to Minnesota Sports Chat. Please like, review, comment, subscribe, do whatever it is all you cool kids do to help spread the word of podcasts.
Thanks for listening to Minnesota Sports Chat, presented by Beans Coffee Company. Use the promo code SPORTSCHAT. That's one word, Sports Chat, to save at checkout. Follow Ross on X at @TheRossBrendel. Like and subscribe to Minnesota Sports Chat wherever you get your podcasts. Rate and review kindly.